Do you think I eventually will get to a point where I'm clear about everything? Or do you think it's just like perfection that you can never reach almost?
One of the beautiful things about learning something about the mind is we haven't yet fully mapped everything. And cognitive type is going to, I hope to take you as far as I've gotten myself along the line of understanding this. But yeah, there's still frontiers that even our group of certified readers, we're still exploring. So whenever you feel satisfied, that's fine with me.
Gotcha. Yeah. No, I was just curious because I was wondering, like, does your TI annoy you sometimes?
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, require you to spend so much time understanding things and clarifying things that you feel like it's just getting in the way of progress in some sense.
Yes, yeah. I think that, for example, even just my theory, which is very TI heavy, as you've noticed, has taken a lot longer to flesh out than other theories that are much more simplistic, but I'm still in the R&D mode for much longer, trying to refine things endlessly. You know?
Yeah, I understand exactly what you're saying. But having said that, just on this topic, I'm not trying to say I'm anything. It's just I've gone to university. I studied computer science. I studied mathematics.
Oh, cool.
And so I understand your metaphors and these ways of thinking. But think about someone who hasn't. Think about someone who didn't spend years at uni. I've spent a lot of time on this, not just reading through your stuff, and that's I'm fine. I'm completely fine with that. But think about, and I still have a lot of questions to ask, and I'm still not 100% sure. I'm honest about it. Do you know what I mean? I'm not sure that I would say I don't understand it clearly. Do you know what I mean? But
Yeah.
I can't imagine the average. I don't know the average person. They would spend maybe equally amount of time on this.
Absolutely. Really, I think my opinion on this is as follows. I actually think that the amount of information, the amount of clarity, and the amount of expertise that is required of a proper typological system is the kind of thing that could be seminars in a college or a college class, but it's not. So and for example, a lot of it is framed as a pop psychology. Oh, what type am I? Oh, there's these four color types. Oh, there's these animals. There are different terms, and people are very recreational with it. It's very amateur and it's very hobbyist. And so that's one perspective where people don't spend that much time in it because all they really want is simply to get some insight into themselves, somebody to tell them maybe nice things that they want to hear, frame things better for their own personal comprehension. And then there are the rest of us who actually wants to, let's say, understand fundamental human cognition, psychological differences that underpin our human species. And that's actually a scientific question. And that's the kind of thing that does deserve one or two college courses. And my long-term vision, I don't know if this will come to fruition, but hopefully, I would love to be at some point in a college setting, or maybe if not a college setting, giving live lectures, and from that, who knows what opportunities might open. But in an ideal future where I had everything I needed, I would either train or be somebody that could give this in a college setting.
Oh, definitely. Like I can read other stuff way easier, and that's not a lack of clarity, like in the expression. It's just this stuff is so abstract. Honestly, I feel like because I've done undergrad, I've never done a PhD, but I think this material-wise, this is definitely not undergrad. Would be postgrad. Even postgrad, this is very understanding heavy in the sense that you can't practice. Do you know what I mean? You can understand it a little bit, but to really understand the deep stuff, it's really abstract, I would say. It's like, it's, again, not a problem for me. It's just because, yeah, I think it just needs more examples.
Actually, that is super great feedback. So one of the things that when I'm writing the books, which I gave you a little preview, what I'm trying to do is try to toe this line between keeping the content rigorous, because honestly, it can't be dumbed down below a certain point. But what can be done is I could be more explicit with the examples that I use.
I want to try to understand basically the NESI axis and NISE axis. Yeah, I want to try to understand it, but could you use examples to explain them to me? For example, you're looking at something and what you're actually seeing, like a chair or whatever.
Cool. Okay. Yeah. All right. Give me a moment to generate an example in my mind. I might go pause silent first for a few seconds here.
Yeah. May I sort of something like, for example, if you're looking at something, maybe you can compare SE and NE. Like how will they see things differently? Something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So I think I have an example. I want to use the example of, let's say you're playing with a child. This kind of hits home for me because I have a little 2-year-old, so that my NE comes out when I play with him. Let's say that you have a toy box. There's a variety of toys. In it, there's a little rubber ball. There's, I don't know, some cars and some action figures and so on and so forth. And if you wanted to play with the child in an NE manner, what you might do is first you play in the normal sense. For example, you get the car and you drive it around a little racetrack, or there's those carpets that have drawn on lines and so forth. And then soon enough, you realize we did that already, so let's do something different. So you might mix it up and you have to get creative. You might do something like you pretend the car is a horse and you put the action figure on the car and you ride it like a horse and you go yeehaw like that. Or you grab the ball and you pretend the ball is an apple and you get the action figure and you're like, oh, let's eat this apple. You simulate these scenarios. And what you're doing when you're doing that is you are taking an object and looking around the field of that object for similarity. If a little red rubber ball is similar to an apple, and so you say, okay, so let's simulate a different scenario in which it is an apple, and let's play action figure is eating an apple. So you're using an association leaping to things that are proximally connected to generate a new scenario. So it's playful in the sense it's like a what if. What if the car is actually a horse? What if the ball is actually an apple? Or what if the airplane is actually a fish in the sky or a whale through the clouds? Stuff like that. There's a suspension of disbelief involved with any.
Okay, hang on a second. Let me ask some specific questions, right?
Yeah.
So like a red rubber, apple's round, apple's red, right? It looks similar to a red rubber ball.
Yeah.
That's based on attributes of both objects, right? You think about it as like data science. You have an object which has attributes. The color is red, the shape is round, just have two attributes. Then you have another object like a rubber ball. It's almost exactly the same, right? So they're very close in proximity.
In the cluster.
In the cluster, they will be very close. The distance you measure would be very close to zero. So you would exchange that out for something similar, right?
Yes.
You look at an object, then you abstract to something else?
I would say interchange. It's like dimension hopping in a way. Like I'm speaking now in a more personal sense as an NE user. You enter a what if alternative reality where the rules are a little different and things can happen that in reality can't really happen. It's a playful kind of fantasy. Yeah.
Sure. What rules are you changing? You change the red rubber ball into an apple. What rule are you changing?
So the size, the texture, the shape, how edible it is, all these things are suspended. We don't care that it's actually not edible. We don't care that it's actually way bigger than the action figure. We're going to shrink it down in our imagination to fit, and we're going to make it edible.
You're pretending it's an apple, pretty much, in a way. Like, in a way, you're not pretending. It's almost real to you.
And now think about it this way. Remember what I said, that PE seeks novelty, right? Okay. So that is novel because basically the unexplored territory is the unexplored associations that every present object has. So the exploration happens in that kind of radius, the cluster radius. So NE's exploration is branching out in the cluster groups. That makes sense?
Oh my God. Yeah. It just makes sense to me.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And that's novelty. And you like doing that. You enjoy doing that as an any user.
Yeah.
Why? Is it just novelty? Is it just like something intrinsic? You're just doing it? Or is there another reason?
I have an objective answer and a personal answer. Let me go with the objective answer since that's the more theoretically sound one. I believe that just as it's satisfying to click next on a Netflix show to watch the next episode because you have knowledge that you want, it is also satisfying to quote unquote discover this associative branching. It's satisfying because it gives a kind of knowledge that it's the knowledge of what could be. And it's an imaginative expansion as you realize, oh, this is also a possibility related to the present. It's almost like discovering, I don't know if you watch shows like Rick and Morty or something like that, but imagine getting a peek into other alternate universes or multiverses where you're like, oh, I just peeked into a different dimension where there's more information that I didn't know about, and information gathering is what Annie likes, and it's satisfying in itself. So it just peeked into a different reality, and that's fun,
like,
exciting.
You've seen the show, obviously, where they have a different dimension, multi-dimension, where the phones are people and the chairs are pizza.
Yeah,
that comes to
exactly. Perfect example.
And you're just like, I wonder what's going to happen. I wonder how it works out.
If phones were people and they ate pizza, then how would they drive? How would they use this object or that object? How would they cook? Would they cook food or would they cook material objects? It raises a bunch of questions. Yeah.
Sure. Cool. Hang on. There's one little thing I want to clarify, just because I'm not an any user and I'm trying to understand it because it's part of CT, obviously. And also, there's a significant number of other people who think like this, right? I know, we both know that. I know that. So it's good to know how other people think. But obviously, I have my ontological bias.
Yeah.
Because I use SC, I don't use NE. Obviously, the table turns when we talk about SI and NI, right? Because the way I look at NE would be like, why? Just
what's the point? These are necessary. Real. Yeah, they're unnecessary.
Yeah, by me, if I do that, I will start questioning my sanity.
Fair. Yeah, exactly. Right? That's correct. Yeah. And it would be a questioning of sanity because it's not how you operate or think. Yeah.
And that's obviously not something that, I think this is why I'm really bad at writing creative stories. Like if I can think of anything I'm really bad at, that would be creative writing. Because I had no idea. I go blank.
Yeah.
But I feel like that's something any would excel at.
Because they can generate simulated scenarios by just tweaking the present parameters. Yeah. And that's what...
And you know, like when you're learning like a language or something like that, and you're like, the teachers, oh, make up an example. I like my head hurts or my feet hurt, or I just can't come up with that. It's just so difficult for me because it's, I don't know, like I have to see it in order to, for it to, like for me to say it. You do know, I can't just come up with something that is not there objectively. Something like that. We all can pretend, right? We all can pretend. Like even if I don't use any, you can say to me, oh, pretend this rock is a gun.
Yeah.
And you give me a rock, pretend it's a gun. Like in drama class, right? I'll pretend this rock is a gun. I can do it. I can pretend the rock is a gun. I'll be like, oh my God, where did this come from? I can't do that. I don't want to do it. Do you know what I mean? I don't want to do it. But I do that. Is that how you think? You just pretend it's, in a way, it's almost real to you that it is a gun.
Yeah, I want to say two things about this. Number one is that lately in CT theory, we've come to accept a view of the functions that is more scientific, not as like these absolutely mutually exclusive things, but more of a spectrum. And secondly, that SE users can do any kind of activities and vice versa on occasion. It's just like they don't do as many. And secondly is that what I've just explained with this example with the playing and pretend with the child is a more extreme case, but it's not like we're doing this at every instance of existence. But
yeah, that would be something else.
Actually, I will say though, there are some really any heavy people who every moment or every few minutes, they will leapfrog to some silly fantasy alternative. And it's really, they're fun people. They're amusing people. Let's put it that way. They're amusing people, if nothing else.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was watching like Curb Your Enthusiasm. Larry David was in a restaurant and he just started doing this thing, and I was just thinking, oh yeah, that's probably Andy, how he just like jump into things in a way. Yeah, and it's great for creativity. I think if there's no any SR people, it would just be a really boring world. Like we wouldn't have that stuff. It'd just be all documentaries, no stories. So yeah, it really boring.
Don't put yourself
Yeah.
down too much. And I can be
Yeah.
very creative also. But yeah, it would be more serious for sure. More serious.
Yeah.
The fantasy would be there, but it would be much more sober.
So you're associating. Okay, so what would SE do in this situation? It wouldn't do that. It would just like, oh, that's it.
So the directionality of exploration is different. So with any, because they both want to explore, which means they want to get the next object. They want to uncover the next thing. For any, it kind of diverts. It takes a left turn or a right turn. It goes sideways. It explores tangential information, adjacent information. Whereas with SE, it goes deeper forward. Like it goes deeper into it, which, to take a tactile example, you could zoom in on the object that you're working on. You could take it apart or examine it more closely, or try to enhance your understanding in depth. So it's more depth of understanding and less breadth or branching out.
This is a good example. Let's carry on. So in the same example, what would SE do in the playing toys with a child kind of scenario? Yeah.
Honestly, SE would, let's say, because it will exhaust, once it exhausts the tangible limits of the object, for example, they've played with the objects in all the reasonable ways that there are to play with those objects, it will seek more objects, and it'll make, for example, it might say, oh, I want to go outside now because outside there's something else. There's a different, even if it's just sticks and rocks, at least there. So my little boy, luck would have it, is a SE lead. And he does play pretend with me. He's good at it when I innovate, but it could, in some case, all kids are, because that's the state of their consciousness at this time. So it's something that, but any users just keep it into adulthood anyway. Tangent. But he would much rather just be put in a new environment where there are new objects to explore. So rather than branching out possibilities from existing objects, he's just given me new objects, give me new toys. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So they move on to different things. Like I'm done with this. Like you would maybe. Here's another way to think about this. Here's another way to see it.
Exactly. Yeah.
You can generate novelty by yourself from previous. I think things are click. But you need past experience to generate the novelty. You can't just make up, because you got to know what an apple is. You can't just come up with a thing that doesn't exist.
And that's where you're using SI. Yeah. So you could think of, oh, this is a great way to explain the SI and any access together. So the range of exploratory possibility that you have as an NESI user is contingent on the amount of SI datasets you have and the number of rearrangements you can do with those datasets.
Okay, hang on a second. Yeah, I get you. It's like the cluster, right? How many objects are in the cluster, right?
And how many?
Yeah, like apples in a cluster, right? Round red things, right? Round red things. How many round red things have you basically, do you know?
Yeah.
What are those? Like a rubber ball?
Maybe a basketball.
Yeah.
Maybe a tomato.
The more you know, the more you can abstract. The more you can exchange.
Exactly. The more you can swap it out. And then, yeah, exactly. So you depend on SI's anchoring of the past information to make your exploratory any exploration.
Oh my God. It's all coming together.
Great. Awesome.
Yeah. Oh my God. Okay. And so this is how SI helps NE, I suppose, right? In order for NE to do that, you need SI. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
Right.
Yeah. Because there's a limit, like SI is limited, right? Because there's a finite number of red round things. How many do you know? Like 200 max, probably, right? It's pretty hard to come up with more than 10. I don't use NE, so I wouldn't, but like, I just said 200. But after you exchange it 200 times, okay.
Yeah.
I don't know I can. Let's move on to the next Whereas SE would be like, I finish, there are only 10 objects in the room. I can't leave the room without 10 objects.
So I actually do think that one of the gifts / curses of SE is that it entertains itself less.
Yeah.
It's less entertained by its own mental loops, and it really needs to have more territory to explore. So yeah, the SE child in the same scenario would be like, can we please go out? Can we go to the park? Take me somewhere.
Yeah.
My brother
Yeah,
is an SE lead, and he was very much like this growing up. He was always telling my mother, I want to go to the skate park. I want to go to... And my mother would be driving him to different places almost every day.
Cool. Yeah, so this perfectly explains SE and NE. Al, can you explain NI and SI? And also maybe PI.
So in moving forward, I want to start first by tying in what we said about NE with NI. So if I can do an NE-NI comparison to lead us into NI. So when I said that the NE kind of looks in the cluster space for adjacent associations, we could also ask from an evolutionary perspective, why? Because we asked that about SE, and we know clearly SE, we're hunter-gatherers, we need to gather. It's essential that we gather new material and so forth. Now, on the NE side, if I had to build like a Steelman case for NE's evolutionary niche, what's the purpose of randomly speculating different scenarios? It is because in doing so, you find recombinations of things that are useful. So, for example, let's say that you're in a tribe in the prehistoric era and you're trying to come up with solutions to things. You end up discovering solutions by experimenting and simulating scenarios. So you say, what happens if I boil this plant? And what if I extract this dye from this plant? And hey, I bet I could probably dip my cotton in that and make it into a fabric. If you take existing objects and you extract associatively, you actually end up creating new ideas and new innovations. So yeah. And in that way, it's an advantage because basically you tap into what is unseen more than what is the present, and that expands your innovative range, right? So that's how NE can succeed in an evolutionary context. That's similar to NI, because NI also sees what is unseen in the sense that it anticipates what isn't in front of you. So it's another window into perception that is not literally present. But in this case, it's more predictive in trends. So if I had to draw an analogy from prehistoric times, I would say that NI would be better suited to predicting the cosmological seasons, mapping the patterns of the stars, for example, and realizing, oh, this year is going to be a good harvest year, or this year is going to be a bad harvest year. Why? Because here are the literal data points that I can use to anticipate that this year will be a good year or a bad year. And this is also information that hunter-gatherers really relied upon.
Yeah, something like a pattern, like noticing patterns. Like, for example, this time of the year, there's a lot of fish or something like that.
Yeah, well, let's say that you're a hunter-gatherer in the prehistoric era. And you notice, I'm just making this up, but let's say you notice that the deer were roaming the forest, like they were coming out of hiding before the first rains. I don't even know if this is a fact. I'm just putting together ideas. So you say, oh, but then in some years it rains first and then the deer come out of the forest. And then you notice, because remember we talked about perception being associative without rational rules. But somehow you notice that if the deer come out first before the first rains of the season, something else happens. Like the earth is more fertile, there's more production of plants and so forth. But if the opposite's the case, then there's swampy ground and the predators are everywhere. So anyway, you don't understand why, but somehow there's this association. So then you use these cues, and you're the shaman who, and I don't mean this in a disrespectful way, because I actually think it's brilliant. You're a shaman, and people come to you and they say to you, is this a good year for harvest? And you use those patterns that you've picked up on because you're an old shaman, you're in your 60s, you've lived a life, you've understood the trends, and you say yes or no to the king or to the tribe leader. That is exactly how NI would play out in an evolutionary sense in prehistoric era.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Okay. Can you give me an example of what does PI want, first of all? What does it want?
PI wants predictability. It wants to understand and predict how things are going to unfold. It wants to have a map that is completely mapped. It doesn't like gaps in the map because that is uncertain territory. It wants to have a certainty to the world. Yeah.
Can you give me an example? Like one example of PI being able to predict something, one example of PI not being able to predict something.
Yeah, there's tons of examples in politics because there's tons of PI in politics. So let's start with the one that I just gave about predicting the seasons. It's very important to predict the seasons because if you can, then you save your assets. You could either go into a famine or you can go into produce because you have the right strategy, whether to preserve your food or to expand or to sow more or plant more or plant less. You don't want to be caught off guard. Another example, if SI doesn't know, oh, certain tribes are enemies, or oh, people that wear this kind of attire, they tend to dupe people, they're thieves, then it could be taken advantage of by thieves. So knowledge is security. The way that PI thinks, its knowledge is security. Knowledge fills the gaps that make us vulnerable.
Yeah, so being able to use, so basically, is it P that brings it some information? P brings the information, and SI is what does my worldview tell me about this information? Does it involve JI at all? This identification, or not really?
In the whole cognitive system, it definitely plays the role. So it's necessary for the whole system to operate. There's no way that a person ever just uses pure PI. There's always some of each of the four involved. So there's at least a minimal level of JI use just to identify in a simple way the objects. But it doesn't mean that they have to go deep into the essential questioning of the nature of the objects. That's more like when JI is the leaf function. Just enough to quantify the objects is sufficient.
Yeah, just enough, minimal in a way. Like you need it basically, just a little bit, but not too much to blur everything. So it's just okay. I see someone is, oh, that person's got a knife and he's running towards me. Yeah, he's probably wants to kill me or something like that in the prehistoric time. And you're like, oh, let's run. And if you don't get that right, you die.
But PI would want to fill in more facts. For example, like saying, oh, but he's from the so-and-so tribe, and the reason why they are trying to loot my village is because I heard that their king is tyrannical, and recently there was a revolution and a bunch of people escaped from the village in the revolution, and now they're going rampant around the villages. So we might see more of them, and there are different factions. Some factions wear red ribbons, some factions have leather boots. So the more you know of all the backstory, the more you're prepared for all the scenarios that could emerge. So it's not just like the identification of the person in front of you. Oh, he's a thief. He wants to steal from me. It's more, where does the thief come from? What context is creating the thief? And how can I be prepared for all the different things that are involved in knowing this information?
Oh man, this idea sounds like even just listening to that sounds like very alien to me. I don't even know. Yeah, so PI wants predictability, because it's got stored information and it wants that to match reality in a way, right? It's reality is a certain way. My system can basically simulate reality. So I know what's going to happen next.
Yes.
It's like building a model, like a physics model. So I try to model reality. And if my model is good, I get B from A. If I do A to the model, I get B, then B is probably, my model is good. My model is bad, and that doesn't happen, right?
And then you need to tweak your model. So if you thought if something was like, here's an example, a lot of political commentators, very PI heavy political commentators, try to say, oh, who's going to win the election? Based on the voting polls and based on the trends of society, they make predictions. They say, probably Trump is going to win Arizona or whatever it is. Kamala is going to win this state. Because they have this knowledge and they know the demographics and what the demographics are saying.
Yeah.
And all that's very PI heavy stuff. Very SI heavy also.
Yeah. Okay. The example you gave for SE and NE was perfect because I found in a way, it's not symmetry, but it's like almost symmetry in the sense that NE looks at an object. it just exchanges the object, right? It changes it with something else. And then once it's done, all the combinations, all the different exchanges, they could, by exhausting SI, it moves on to the next one, right? Whereas SC straight up moves on to the next object, and only when it exhausts the available objects it can play around with, it will maybe start abstracting, exchanging into another, like just using your imagination, that kind of stuff, right? It's trying to look for information, but two different ways.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I think and you want a similarly symmetrical example for the PI, for instance.
That's what I'm...
Perfect. I just came up with one. I think I have one that might be more symmetrical for you and more fundamental. Let's give this one a try. Say that you are somewhere. You woke up and you don't know where you are. As far as you can tell, you're in the middle of a forest or something. Now, you want to understand where you are and what your surroundings are. Now, the SI scenario might look like this. You walk around a little bit and you start to map the territory immediately around you. There's a radius and you map the radius around you, but you don't want to get too far because you don't know if there's predators or something. So let's say you walk around within a 1 kilometer radius and you map out the 1 kilometer and you say, okay, so I know within a 1 kilometer space, there's nothing dangerous. I feel safe here. This is known concrete information. This is tangible, literal data that I understand. And that is like the limit of what I'm comfortable with until they want to learn more. That's the equivalent of like their SI territory, right?
Yeah.
Now let's take the opposite case. Let's say you're an NI lead, you're dropped in the forest, right? And then you do a little bit of walking as well. Now, as you're walking, you're not really very good at, your memory is not so literal. So you're not really remembering the whole square kilometer or whatever. But what you are remembering are the thematic elements of the space you're in. For example, the certain kind of trees that are growing, the certain kind of moss, the certain kind of fish. You're using SE for some of this, but you're NI lead. And then the general setting that you're in, whether you're by a creek or whether you're in a valley or on top of a hill, high elevation, low elevation. So you get some generals located in your map. That is enough information for trend lines to be drawn. So with the NI user, they will understand, oh, since there's a creek, there's probably snow coming further down up north. There's probably snow on the mountain. There's probably a high mountain because that's where the creek comes from. And the trees are of this nature, so I'm probably this high above the shore. If I go down, I'll probably see the ocean within, let's say, 500 meters down. There'll probably be a flat area. Somehow, the known territory, so remember, known territory here was defined by SI as the 1 kilometer radius, but it knows it very well. That 1 kilometer is very well mapped. The NI user doesn't remember the 1 kilometer. Like, if you tell it, where was that one rock that looks like a person? I don't know. I wasn't paying attention to the specific rock shapes, but what I was paying attention to are the trends. And it has a different kind of knowing of where it is that is in some ways more expansive. So the radius might be more like 10 kilometers. So in a general sense, the NI user would know its situation within a 10 kilometer radius, but in a general sense, whereas the SI lead will know its situation within a 1 kilometer radius, but very specifically.
Yeah.
I could probably draw it for you if you want.
Yeah.
I'm doing a screen share right now. I'm just going to draw some shapes here. Actually, let's do it this way. Let's go. So NI is going to be over here. I'm a big fan of Microsoft Paint also. And just like I love a notepad. Okay, so SI.
Yeah.
So 1 kilometer radius for SI, smaller, but they're very well mapped. So you could say like high density, and the NI would be lower density knowledge, but broader radius. So I'm going to characterize this by a darker gray here and a lighter gray here. Low density, high breadth is one example. And this is the opposite, high density, low breadth. Oops.
I've got a question. Let's just call a guy A. He's walking around. He got dropped off somewhere in the jungle by like aliens or whatever. So he got dropped off, and then he's basically walking around this radius. Let's just say there's a source of water or something like that. The only source of water. I can't really leave that far, or whatever decision. I want to stay around here, just walk around, and then come back. But I want to basically explore this area really well. I know where to get food. I know where to get water. I know where it's safe. So that's what he's doing. He wants to be familiar with the environment.
Yeah.
Isn't that SE? Is that not SE or is that? It sounds like SE to me. No.
Yeah, this is why I wanted to say that my example requires both functions working together. So what you're saying is both more SE and SI at the same time. It's more S in general. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Okay.
Here, let me give you an example. If you can see me drawing here. So this is the exploratory route, right? So in this case, for this NI user, it is SE, walking around, right? And this is the path that they trail. So let's say they both did around 1 kilometer of exploring around their territory, right? The difference is that based on that 1 kilometer, trend lines are extrapolated by NI and says, oh, I know my territory is actually a little bit bigger than my literal knowledge base because I can predict in a way what comes afterwards based on what is. These are the trend lines.
So basically, SI is just taking things literally. Here's a tree that only grows when there's moisture all around, or all year round, or something like that. If the rain stops for a month, it would, or 2 weeks, it would die, or something like that. SI would just be like, here's this particular tree. Let's just call it like a swamp cypress or something like that, right? Sure. Here's a swamp cypress. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. Here's another one. Oh, they're all swamp cypresses. Why is that? They don't ask that question. Whereas NI would say, oh, that's curious. They're just like, there's only these kind of trees around. I know they're wet in conditions. So I must be in an area where there's a high level of rainfall or something like that. Is that what it is?
You're on the right track. And as a generalization, I would say that is correct. The only adjustment I would make is to say that SI users might actually also technically know this information. They might say, oh, I know swamp cypresses are, let's say, they grow in this sort of area, but it doesn't mean that I can be sure and extrapolate beyond what I've tried. So SI, it might know that information and say, there's a probability I'm in an area that is generally wet, but it doesn't know for sure unless it actually goes and it maps that area out. So there's always some uncertainty when it comes to what it hasn't actually explored literally. So if you see my diagram, there's like question marks, right? You see the question marks here, drawing. It's speculate. Basically, SI distrusts speculation that isn't.
They just refuse to do it. They're like, it could be true, but I don't know for sure. So I'm not gonna. If I have to make a binary choice, I'm just gonna say I don't know.
And this is why SI is a very scientific approach in some sense, because, for example, in science, the SI approach is favored in the sense that just because something happened in this scenario here doesn't mean it's also going to apply more broadly in other fields. You see what I'm saying? You have to independently test that something is true in a different scenario. You can't just take it for granted.
Yeah. Does SI not extrapolate at all, or does it just not take the extrapolation seriously?
Yeah, it doesn't take it seriously. It knows the context that it's probably in based on probability, but this goes back to ontological bias. The ontological bias of NI is to affirm automatically the intuition, let's say. I know where I am because the data points I have tell me this is my condition zone. So it just says flat out, this is where I am. SI is maybe I'm there, but I could be somewhere else. It's not very speculative, and it doesn't trust speculation. So the choice might be, I'm just going to stay in this perimeter that I know. I'm not going to branch out until maybe I'm going to try to make a flare or a fire so someone notices me, so that they come to me and save me, instead of saying, I know the direction where civilization is. I'm just going to go there. And so,
yeah, cool. Yeah, thanks, Auburn.
I feel like a lot of things clicked for you this time. I'm very happy that you've had some clarity, especially on the NE versus SE. I'm very happy about that.
Oh, yeah, that was perfect. That just explained everything. That was perfect. Perfect example.
All right. I hope that was useful, and we'll keep in touch.
Yeah. All right. See you later. Bye.
Have a good one. Take care.